Hello, everyone. Welcome to our seminar on pastries, pies, and handheld snacks. My name is Mark Florka. I will be your host for today. And with me today is Remy Regato from Benexia. Right. So I'm going to go into a little bit of a presentation for you guys first, and then Remy will take over the reins and he will go through a presentation that he has prepared. Okay, here we go. So, as I said, welcome to Pastries, Pies, and Handheld Snacks. And this is brought to you by Prova, Extracting the Essentials, Benexia, Advanced Seed Nutrition, and Brabender, a brand of Anton Par, as well as malt products. So, what we will get into here is, first of all, the introduction of things. And we will talk about the types of different handheld snacks, the ingredients as they affect snacks, as well as some processing cues. So, as I mentioned, I have Remy Regato of Benexia with me, and my name is Mark Florka. I am with BAKERpedia as an independent contractor. I am your host of the Baked in Science podcast. And I also host a number of these different BAKERview seminars. And I've been in the baking industry for coming up on 50 years soon, but we won't get into that right now. And I have with me Remy Rigardo, who has loads of experience from Benexia, and we will get into now the rest of the presentation here. So first of all, some of the market trends and opportunities in defining the different categories is handheld snacks cover a wide area and product market supermarket shelves, and they often include nutritional bars and handheld snacks such as granola bars, handheld pies, croissants and danishes, and even cake bars. In addition to that, pastries and the pie market is projected to have a compound annual growth of 3.9% for the period from 2019 to 2029. So over those 10 years, there's going to be a huge growth of 3.9%. Current novel trends are surging due to consumer interest and healthier baked goods. So that's increasing a demand for convenient and delicious food, right? And consumer surveys indicate to us that the current growth is being driven by this demand, and market growth is also influenced by novel trends. So consumers who are looking for ready-to-eat products with nutritional benefits associated with the increasing keto and clean label trends, and some of the quick serve and coffee chains have also started to offer savory foods and different options available. So what are the five types? So the five types we basically look at mostly are flaky pastries, rough puff, which is kind of like a shortcut puff pastry, choux pastries, phyllo dough pastries, and of course, short crust pie pastries. In traditional snacks, that means mostly apple pie, pumpkin, blueberry, and pecan. So pies are a culinary preparation consisting of a pastry crust filled with sweet and savory ingredients, typically enclosed with a sealed shell. Some are open-faced, but typically they're enclosed with a sealed shell. In the USA, we eat our traditional pies at festive seasons, and the thing for snacks, the handheld snacks would be things similar to like the McDonald's apple pies and that type of thing. And there we see the most common flavors in the US are apple, cherry, chocolate, and lemon. These come in various forms, and they're the diverse array of what we call portable food items, to provide convenient sustenance on the go. And it's a huge category. Nutritional bars, bites. These are often like almost like they look like resemble little cookies, so to speak. Cake bars, brownies, croissants, and danishes. So let's get into ingredients now. So on the ingredient side, flour is obviously one of the major ingredients, and it serves as the backbone of many of our structures. It creates a sturdy base for fillings and toppings. And it is necessary for the creation containing a gluten protein when hydrated and kneaded forms a network that gives the dough its elasticity and strength. Pastry or all-purpose flour is what's most commonly used with a protein content of around 10% protein. Higher protein flours will usually make for a very tough product, and are used only in very specialty type applications, where high protein flours can be mixed with pastry flour to come up with a blend, usually anywhere from 10 to 30% of pastry flour with hard wheat flour to get a nice tender structure. Right? And the hard wheat flour provides the extensibility, the pastry flour provides the tenderness, right? And don't forget with keto, high protein and low carb trend, the best thing you need to use there is wheat protein isolate. There you get your structure binding forms, you get more protein into the product and without getting that toughness, right? So you can get more protein in there for keto. And then with gluten-free, you want to look to other protein sources such as different peas, lentils, leaves, and other seeds such as chia seed. And using resistant starch is usually from tapioca in most cases. Helps it could the dough's ability to hold together, and that's where also wheat protein isolates and resistant starches are very, very helpful. Water. Water is a crucial ingredient in baking, serving as a hydration agent that binds all of the other ingredients together, and it facilitates gluten development. In handheld snacks, it ensures a proper consistency of batters and doughs, and it activates the functional ingredients. Fat. Fat can often be very complicated. In pies and pastries, it coats the flour particles, inhibiting gluten formation so that it doesn't become too tough, and it creates a tender, flaky texture. And it also helps provide that layering texture in terms of the steam pockets in the lamination, right? And of course, flavor. In handheld snacks, it contributes to the mouthfeel and helps as part of the binding system of the snacks and holding everything together and creating a satisfying eating experience. Now, sugar. Sugar adds richness of flavor and textures in pies and pastries. It is caramelization, it is color, it is structure and binding. In handheld pastries, it also contributes to regulating water activity to prevent microbial growth. So it has a lot of different functions. And of course, flavor appeal is one of the big things that the consumer notices when they eat it, and the color for caramelization and things for the visual. Now, here's the complicated ingredients. As little as it seems and a small quantity as it used, but yeast. So in the yeast-raised snacks, things like croissants and danishes and some of the pizza pockets or things like that, yeast is what is used for part of the leavening system. And in general, we have three different types of yeast. We think of dry active yeast, instant yeast, and fresh yeast. They're also called cake yeast. Right? So the cake yeast is the one that is the most traditional, and it is very high in water content, and usually about 60% water, roughly. And it is used in a lot of different applications, especially where things are being made fresh in an artisanal application. The nice thing about traditional yeast is that you break it up and mix it into the liquids and make your dough, and it starts fermenting almost immediately. Right? The more complicated thing is that it needs to be stored refrigerated, and it has a shorter shelf life in terms of how long you can keep it. Ideally, it's only 1 week, right? And some are formulated to last a little longer. In larger commercial bakeries, the cake yeast is in 1 or 2 pound blocks. And then from there, it goes up to what is called a crumbled yeast, which comes in 50-pound bags. And it is, as the name says, a crumble. It's already broken up. And from there, in very large commercial bakeries, we get into what is called a creamed yeast system, where there's even more liquid in the system to allow it to be easier pumped to automatic weighing stations and things and incorporated quickly into the dough, right? So that's the fresh yeast. And from that, we have then different similar type of bacteria strains. The yeast specialists can tell you all about that. But we have instant yeast is one of the most popular ones these days. And instant yeast, as the name implies, is instant. It goes directly into the dry ingredients and is mixed then with your water and everything else into the dough. It's still important to keep it out of direct contact with salt for osmotic pressure so that it doesn't damage the yeast cell and slow fermentation too much. But it dissolves very, very quickly. It does not need to be prehydrated. Some people do, but it's not necessary. If you work with instant yeast, the most important thing to remember, like with fresh yeast, you can't use hot water. You want to stay below 110 degrees Fahrenheit, right? And cold water on instant yeast is also damaging to the yeast. So you basically want to stay at an ambient temperature of somewhere between 65 to 100 degrees is really the ideal maximum range, right? Then we have active yeast. Now, people talk about activating the active yeast. It actually doesn't need to be activated. It just needs to be unprotected, because active yeast is active and it is protected with a starch layer. And you can often see this even when you look at instant and active yeast side by side. The active yeast pearls are much larger. Most commonly, they tend to be a little bit darker in color because of that starch covering, right? And so they need to be released to allow the active yeast to do its thing. And so that is why those usually have to be hydrated first. They have to be soaked in water for a few minutes before adding to the dough so that this releases the yeast in its active state. Beyond that, there are different types of yeast that we often may use in snack type applications where there are very high sugar content. And that is an osmotic tolerant yeast, so that it is resistant to the osmotic pressure of the sugar and can still ferment very well. So if you have something that has more than, like, say, 6% in baker's percent sugar in the dough, you'll want to go to an osmotolerant yeast and ask your yeast supplier for that. So other ingredients, that was a lot on yeast, right? So then, but it's, little ingredient, big impact, right? But eggs also is one of the ones these today, and there are a lot of egg replacement strategies out there. So you want to be careful that sometimes you don't want to replace all of your egg, just maybe half or a quarter to give you some cost management, right? Eggs are very important in providing structure. They are also a liquefier, as we say in culinary, in that they are part of your dough system and keeping the viscosity correct to make the dough soft enough to process, right? And then in the baking process, it helps bind, it adds richness, and it gives you a depth of flavor. And in handheld snacks, it's primarily as a binding agent. In these types of snacks, there's usually a kill step. So these aren't the type that are cold set. These would have to be baked because of the raw egg being added to it. And if any other similar raw ingredients like flour that hasn't been treated is added in the system, it needs to be baked for that kill step. So processing pastries. when we look at some of the basics of starting with a raw pastry, there are different processes we can go through. In things like danishes and croissants, there's a laminating process that will create multiple layers. These vary depending on processor. They can be anywhere from 12 up to 35, 40 layers, right? In puff pastry, they can be up to 250 layers in some of the artisan type applications, right? And so these layers are where then the steam from the dough releases, and the insulation from the fat allows little pockets to be created. In artisan croissants these days, many artisans will have the objective of trying to have a nice honeycomb interior when they cut through the center of the croissant. In something like a choux, it's slightly different. And there a dough is cooked almost like a roux, which gelatinizes the starches, and they are then coated by the fat, and eggs are incorporated so that when that goes into the oven, the steam expands, and because the starches are gelled but not set, it expands quite readily and creating these nice pockets, and the fat prevents gluten from forming so that it basically stretches really, really nicely, right? And of course, pie doughs that are almost like a laminated, but we'll get into that in a sec. So there's the dough mixing, there's dividing of the dough, there's laminating, and then after laminating, there's rolling out or sheeting of the dough to the final thickness where we cut it into the different shapes for makeup. Some may be pockets, some may be open-faced fillings. And so the filling and decorating happens sometimes partly before baking and in many cases after baking. Classic croissants these days are often injected with filling after baking. And then cooling would happen before injected fillings. And then otherwise, things like danishes and such, they get an icing or a glaze on top as well. In pies, we prepare the dough, and then that dough quite often needs to be chilled. Now, in more medium-sized operations, the dough is rolled for lining pie shells or shapes or forms. In larger operations, the dough is extruded into pucks or little discs, and they are dropped into the tart mold or the pie mold, and then they are stamped. It's like a heated stamp that compresses it together, and there's little or very little waste that is then trimmed off and moved on for then filling. So that is how the lining is done. So the lining can be done through rolling and applying the dough circle into the shell, or it is stamped, and then we are filling. The fillings that are cooked are usually chilled before going into the pie. And then there's the baking after putting the tops on and the decoration and cooling and setting. Things like a cheese pie or a pumpkin pie or pecan pies, they are often open-faced and they need to chill quite a bit before considering packaging, not only because of the steam that comes off of them, but because that filling can be slightly liquid and moves very easily if it's jostled too much in processing. Yep. So handheld snack bars. There we have the ingredients are mixed to create uniform distribution, and they can often be pressed into a mold or extruded into a shape. Not twin screw high pressure extrusion, but more like a pushing into a shape. So then leveling and smoothing, in many cases they are baked, and in some cases they are simply chilled and then packed. So there are some of these. So we'll go to the baked ones first. The baked ones often it's kind of like a dough that is pressed out or rolled out, and if you think of something like these fruit-filled snack bars, right? Or they can often be done similar to like a pizza pocket too. So then the dough is kind of sheeted out or extruded out, the filling goes on, and then it goes through a mechanism that encloses it, and then it's cut off to seal it. And that creates the little pockets. And they, of course, need to be baked. and others that are not filled, that are just one piece, they may still have ingredients like eggs as a binder and things like that, and they may be deposited into molds to retain a shape. Sometimes they are almost cookie-like in shape, or they go through a rotary molder to create the shape. Some are, as we said, chilled. So if you think of something along the lines similar to the Rice Krispie type of product, where you have a syrup system, or like the melted marshmallows or something, and that's part of what holds it together. That's where also things like wheat protein isolates and starches and syrups like that can be used. But for the chilling process, we use syrups, not the isolates, because the isolates would still need to be baked. And they go through a system that is usually where the product is forced into an area that makes it a certain width and then flattens it out a certain depth. And then you have cutters that cut it into bars and a guillotine that cuts those bars into pieces, and they get packed from there and so on. So processing handheld snack pockets, which is I kind of covered in that sense too. Sorry, I got ahead of myself. But you have the dough mixing, the ingredient mixing. This is where also yeast or baking powders may come in. Filling goes in, proofing if there is yeast involved, baking, and then glazing if it is a sweet type product. So that's it for me right now. So as mentioned, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box, and we will get to those at the end of the presentation after Remy has done his presentation.
I'm Remy Reguero from Venexia. I've been in the food industry for 25 years, 14 of them at Venexia. So I've been in the company from a very, very early beginning. Venexia, we are a Chia company, 100% vertical integrated. We started from 20 years ago with the agricultural production of chia seed in South America, both Bolivia, Paraguay, and Argentina. And then in 2024, we start building our own unique chia processing, ingredient processing facility in Arica, Chile, that where we develop different ingredients for the different food and nutraceutical applications. And one of the ingredients that we're going to be talking today, and this presentation on pastry and handle snack, is going to be chia powder for 35. Okay, but before going to any presentation of the ingredient and application, I always, like Mark say, it's good to talk about the industry, or what is the industry and what the consumer today is looking on pastry, pie, and handheld snack, right? So the first thing is, we know that pastries is all about treat, comfort, experience, and indulgence. We all consume the pastry when we go to the coffee shop, sorry, and have a coffee or a tea. So this is about experience, and we share with loved ones, friends, business, or even in the meeting. We always share pastry because they're delicious and they give us a lot of good flavor and texture. So, but we have to take in consideration that the new generation of consumer are focusing on better for you, low sugar, clean label, and sustainable ingredients on the product. So we always have to take in consideration what type of ingredient are we using in our formulation and on the product, so we can focus the product to the desired target consumer. The also, we have to take in consideration that in the where is the pastry, which is in bakery industry, we have still a lot of trend that push us on healthy pastry application. We also wanted to be taste good and look good, but it had to be better. It had to be more sustainable, and have to be less with less sugar as possible. So this is challenging for the industry because we're seeing a lot of new players and new ingredients and new technologies that come involved, and we have to understand and learn from it and try to incorporate it into our recipe and product development. But we need to always keep in mind that we have to keep the taste and the indulging of the pastry while trying to do it more healthy, better for us and for the planet too. So in this mindset, this is how our ingredient, Benexia Chia Powder WLM, is gonna play. It can be a good role or a good benefits on your formulation in the pastry. Okay, the first thing is Benexia Chia Powder 435 WLM is a chia flour made from 100% white chia seed, completely natural and cleaning process. So basically, it's a product that also are RTE. And Mark mentioned that in pastry we have and bars we have two type of application. We have the one that we bake and the one that is raw. So in terms of using for raw application, you always have to keep in mind that you are using ingredients that are already RTE, that have already been treated. So you can guarantee a food safety to your consumer and a better shelf life of your product. In this case, in Chia Powder 435 WLM, the product is already kissed up, so there's no issue with using it in the raw or baked application. It contains 56% fiber, both soluble and insoluble fiber. It contains 25% of protein and 5% of omega-3. And the great thing about it is that it doesn't contain any sugar, so it's excellent for low-carb keto application. It is gluten-free by nature, so that you can use it on your gluten-free application if you want to do pastry and bar. That is very popular today, and more people are looking for it. It's 100% vegan. It's clean label because it's made from 100% chia seed. It doesn't have any ingredient aid or even biosynthesis fermentation that today is very popular in a very elaborated ingredient. This is a very simple ingredient that was designed especially for the bakery clean label or sustainable application. So why it is functional? And I always say that the chia powder is an ingredient that can be very functional on your bake, especially in the bakery application. And this is because it's very simple. We all in one time have used chia seed, right? And we put it in water. And when we put the water in the chia seed in water, we see this gelling formation gel around the chia seed, right? And that is called the chia mucilage. That chia mucilage is a natural form of the chia seed in order to trap moisture and be able to sprout and germinate for the agriculture. But that chia mucilage have a water absorption capability of 10 milliliter per gram. Now, that mucilage contain a soluble fiber, which is actually the key nutrient in the mucilage that keep that gel information. And that gel information has been found to be very similar to the pseudoplasticity formation that we on ingredient like sense and gum that we consume in the bakery application. And what is the pseudoplasticity? Basically, it gives you a great, excellent elasticity, strength to your dough, but also it allows you to, depending if you are applying shear or not to your dough, you lose the viscosity and the elasticity, but then it's regained. So that gives you a very similar purpose like glutens and other type of soluble fiber. Okay. Now in the chia powder, what we do is actually we concentrate that soluble fiber. Instead of having 1 gram per 100 gram in the chia seed, in the chia powder 435 WLM, we increase it by 5 times. We also increase the protein from 22 gram to 100 gram to 25 gram, okay? And then we improve the surface area, which allow you, because it's a powder and it's under 40 mesh or 400 micron, it's a powder that give you a better uniformly distribution to your dough. So whenever you use this ingredient in your dough, you're gonna have a more widely distributed soluble fiber and benefits in the gelling of your dough. Okay, it's also what it finally do is increase the water absorption capability. Okay, from 10 milliliter per gram that you normally have in chia seed to 25 milliliter of water per gram of water absorption capability, which give you more gelling, emulsion, and swelling in your dough therefore more binding power, right? So when we're using the chia powder for 35, we normally think about this ingredient can help me to replace like sense and gum for clean label application, and it does. You can replace to 1 to 3, both in dough application or in your filling and paste filling, which we're going to be talking later on. It also can replace, let's say, psyllium husk fiber in your gluten-free application. Or also you can replace, let's say, gluten if you want to do a gluten-free version of your pastry product. And additional that binding and elasticity formation of the chia seed, it also can help you to reduce the egg on your bakery application. Okay, it will be needed to be combined with other type of emulsifiers and stabilizer because the egg is have amazing property. So basically, you combine it together. Okay, but when we're using the chia powder 435, we're not only going to have that functionality, but we're also going to have more nutrition. And more nutrition means more protein. The PDCAS of this chia flour is 0.85, which is mainly higher than most of the grain and seed that you can find in the market. Okay, so this is a flour that not only going to bring you functionality, but it's also going to bring you highly nutrition. It's going to give you more omega-3, more fiber, which is at the end less carbohydrate and less carbohydrate. When I say carbohydrate, I'm meaning for sugar or net carb, right? Therefore, less kilocalorie per portion. And also is low in sodium, low in sugar, and saturated fat. Now, in the table on your left, what I have is basically the value of the swelling index of the chia flour, which is 272%, which is very high. But it's also very important that it have a water retention capability of 30 milliliter per gram, which is a lot for a, let's say, natural flour from a seed, right? But also, I give it here a different dosage. When you do dose the chia powder for 35 WLM in water, what are the type of viscosity that you're gonna have? And if you see in around 5%, you're gonna have around 200 to 2,000 to 400, 500 centipoise, which means that this is a product that also can be used in your filling application in order to increase the viscosity or the bulk density in your formulation. Okay, so that's what we're going to see today. Today we're going to see two type of application of this chia fiber 435 WLM. The first one is going to be on the a muffin with the low carb gluten-free muffin, okay, where we are using the chia powder to 10%, and then we're going to use the chia powder 435W, and this time in the filling, okay, in a fruit preparation filling up to 6%. Just to give you an idea of what you can do in the pastry, because pastry, as Mark mentioned before, is basically not only a bakery dough, but it's also an inclusion or let's say a product enhanced in the flavor, texture, and sweetness. So this is something that we always have to be taking in mind, that when we do pastry, we have to deliver this two type of sensation, no? From one side, the soft but crunch texture of the pastry, but from the other side, the sweetness and the comfort of the product, right? So on the bakery application, what we did is we use, since it's gluten-free and it's keto, mean that I cannot use sugar and I cannot use starch. So basically I use allulose as the sugar replacement and the sweetness. Then almond flour, because it doesn't have any, let's say, net carb or sugar. It contains a lot of fiber. It's contain also a lot of protein and fat. So that's going to bring a good flavor and mouthfeel in your dough. It's also I'm using 10% of chia powder for 35 that will give us the functionality of the muffin when it's raised, because when you do a muffin, it's going to be racing, right, leaving, but you also want to keep that elasticity of the dough, because if the dough is not elasticity and trench enough, basically it's going to break and then the muffin's going to collapse And this is something that you don't want to happen in muffin or in product that you are incorporating a lot of gas or air. Okay. Then we're going to use our albumin, coconut flour, sorry, for the sweetness and texture. Then the egg, basically for supporting the functionality of the chia powder, because here we are demanding a lot because it's a gluten-free product. But also it's going to bring me protein, which is net protein, very important for the keto application. You need to deliver a certain amount of protein. And then, of course, baking soda, basically, we're going to be my leaving agent, and soy lecithin and tarragon, just to balance the uh, stabilizing system of your product. So here we have a muffin that in 60 gram deliver 200 kilocalorie, 10% of the daily requirement. It's going to deliver net carb of 2 gram per portion, 11 gram of fiber, and 8 gram of protein. With that, 300 milligram of omega-3. So it's a very healthy dough, or let's say bake area for the pastry. And now this is going to give me enough opportunity to work on the filling, right? Because on the filling we want sweetness. So basically on the filling or the fruit preparation, what we did a apple cinnamon sauce. I choose apple because it was my flavor preference, but you can use a raspberry, blueberry, let's say any type of berry, is strawberry, any berry, or even citric, mandarins, lime, lemon, orange, which are very good flavor for the pastry too. And then here I use 67% of puree, apple puree, with a sugarcane dosage of 14%, around 11% of brown syrup, because this is to avoid too much crystallization of the sugar and have a more viscous feeling. But then instead of using xanthan gum, what normally the industry do in order to increase the viscosity of the product and the binding of the product, I use the chia powder. And I use the chia powder for 35 WLM, or the chia flour, just to have the clean label, because I don't have to mention any more xanthan gum. And how we know hydrocolloids are discussing, or people are discussing or comment on the chia, on the hydrocolloided, that they are not necessarily natural, and because they are highly processed ingredients. So here you can use the chia flour just to replace and have a clean label. This is going to bring me mainly the viscosity, but it's also going to bring me a little bit more protein, fiber, and omega-3 to the whole end product combination. Okay, and then salt, citric acid, and cinnamon powder, just for the flavor, to have the nice acid, let's say, note on your finished product, but also to protect the puree from oxidation, right? Because you want to have the more clear as possible color in your finished product. So basically here in this application, 15 gram of this sauce is 20 kilocalorie. You're gonna have 4 gram of net carb sugar. You're gonna have 0.5 gram of proportion of fiber, about 0.3 of protein, and 15 milligram of ALA in your finished product. Now, in the sauce. Now, when you add it to the product, that's gonna be summing up. And then what you're gonna have is a muffin that have an inclusion that give more flavor and more enhance the sweetness and pastry look like of the product. And let's say at the end, you're gonna have a portion of 75 milligram per portion, and then you're gonna have only 6 net gram. Okay, so a good balance between flavor and texture and consistency of the product. You're gonna have a nutritional balance. And here I give you an idea that this product represents 11% of your daily calorie intake, let's say 2,000 kilocalorie per day. So basically here you giving 45% of this is energy from fat. So if we keep it in keto, it's high in omega-3 with more than 30% of your daily value or daily requirement in omega-3. Okay, it's gonna have 15% of energy from the protein, with a 17% of the daily value of protein, and a 25% from carbohydrate, with 28% of your daily requirement fiber. So in 11%, you get more protein, you get more fat, and you get more healthy fat, and you get more fiber than in most of the a meal, let's say. So basically, this helps you to be also a pastry that can be taken not only in the morning, but in the mid-morning, lunch, or even mid-afternoon in order to fulfill the consumer with a healthy, balanced nutrition. Okay? So, like when they say not talking, let's show up the product, right? So I'm gonna show you in the camera what is the product that we did. But this is a chia powder that we're using, okay, guys? Okay, and this is basically what we did with the sauce. So if you see the sauce, the apple cinnamon sauce, you see this viscosity that you're reaching, okay? Very, very consistently, is the right thing. And the good thing is that you can reduce even more sugar by adding more chia powder for 35. Because when remember that the sugar, the syrup, and the sugar cane, they bring you bulk density, right?
Mm.
And they give you viscosity. But if you want, you can reduce it. Put more, it's going to be more water in the formulation, less sugar, and then you put more chia powder. Chia
Yep.
powder will absorb that water and bind it together, and also it's going to keep and maintaining the viscosity even if you don't have a total solid or bread level in your product. That is enough. Okay, so this is a good thing about it, that you also can use it for cost reduction or even sugar reduction. Okay, and at the end, what you're going to have is this type of muffin that I cut in half, very spongy. Okay, if you see, it's very spongy. And then you have the inclusion inside. It's not very clear because the color of the muffin. But then you have it. You can take like a bread size, and this is a keto bread. We're using the chia
Mhm.
flour. Okay, and you can use the syrup also has a jam. And this is a great thing. Look at it. You can do making even
You have a
jams with
nice
this.
keto jam, or keto-ish.
Ex-
Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And the thing is, you can add, let's say, fruit inside if you want to have, let's say, apple slide, or you want
Mhm.
to have, but this is gonna be coating those fruit, and will keep those product protected from oxidation, because then you are doing a coating, a sugar coating or a binding coating in your fruit preparation, keeping the
Mhm.
product dry, but also avoiding oxidation of your fruit. Okay,
Yep.
so there's a
Excellent.
lot of different applications that we can do, and I don't know if you have any question on it. Please, Mark and I will be more than happy
Yes,
to
thank
respond
you,
to you.
Remy.
Correct. That's totally correct. That's what we mentioned before, just before, is the soluble fiber. As we increase and concentrate the soluble fiber from chia seed in the chia powder for 35 WLM, that allow you to have a more water absorption. So it's up to 25 milliliter of per gram of water. That is a lot. It's 25 as weight. So this is gonna bring you the potential of using more water in your filling recipe instead of using sugar. So you keep more water, but then you're gonna say, well, and the water activity, Remy, what are we gonna do with it, right? But this is the thing that when you absorb that water and the hydrocolloid absorb that water, the water activity is more focused on the free water available. And that is not free water available because the fiber gonna bind that water and pick it up. Okay, and then of course you're gonna have to work with the acidity of your product to keep the lower pH, just to avoid the product. And then what we normally do is pasteurizing the filling. Or you do a batch pasteurization just to make sure that you don't have any microbe from the processing, and then you can use it on your filling pastry.
Yep. Where where sugar is removed, that where the sugar provided viscosity before, the soluble fiber now steps in place to provide that viscosity. And because it's soluble fiber, you also have an reduction in water activity at the same time, similar to what you would have had with sugar.
Totally correct, Mark.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Well, I can speak to that is that um, these type of products are uh, not to compete with the 99 cent a dozen brand muffins, right? These are where people who are looking for nutrition and they're willing to pay a little bit more for quality. So the impact of the ingredient costs when it comes to something like the chia is very competitive. It's used at a very low amount in most of those recipes. It's things like that are causing the increase is almond flour. And when people see something like almond flour on the ingredient listing, they understand that this is a high quality cost ingredient and they are willing to pay for that as well. So it's kind of a little bit of both. It is affordable, but it is also presented as such as that it fits into the market category where people are going to pay for it.
And also, I mean, Mark said it very well. I mean, if you want to have a product that is healthy, good, better, BBBB, I mean, of course, it's going to be a little bit more expensive than the traditional
Hmm.
cost-effective, or let's say, but this is about nutrition. I mean, nutrition is about, delivering good quality. Now, however, don't even, for example, we have a lot of customers that in gluten-free application has found that the chia powder actually help them to reduce costs,
Reduce the
because
cost.
when you use the chia powder you can add more water in your recipe, so you basically are, the water is paying for the fiber, so you, basically it's cost free.
Yeah, and also you can reduce or eliminate the egg albumin, and it makes it easier to replace the egg albumin with other plant proteins. So you're reducing cost and you're potentially producing something that is now vegan.
Exactly.
To theorize in it's going to be more beneficial or easier to work with than with gum systems like xanthan gum. So you still need a starch system, like in any gluten-free type of application. So when you're in something like a croissant or Danish, where you're replacing wheat flour, the starch is the easy thing to replace because all that does is bind water and set structure in the baking process. Not all it does, but it's less complicated a situation. Whereas now the other part, replacing the gluten part, which is the extensibility in laminating and the extensibility in capturing the gas and the steam in the oven, that's where things like chia come in and help with that mucilage. It gives you that texture, that binding property, and then you can combine that with something like tarragon and or other plant proteins that also help to simulate gluten. So it ends up being not a single silver bullet solution, but it's a very helpful solution that is one of the bigger, more potent bullets in your toolbox to go gluten free with something complex like a croissant.
Mark, let me share a recent experience. I just have
Oh,
a
cool. Good.
couple
Yeah.
a couple of weeks ago, and that was,
Yeah.
it was not in croissant. I haven't done it yet. I'm not a pastry or a bakery expert, but I was working with a customer that wanted to work on pizza dough. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so in pizza dough, it's not the same as a croissant, but he was working on a gluten-free application, right? And and he wanted to have a good texture, and you need to have that elasticity. You say when you do pizza, elasticity is key, because what you want is to entrap that air, but at the end on the crust, right?
Yep.
And croissant is very similar, because you
Yep.
roll your croissant, but then in the bake it's going to be expanding. And what you want is that each layer get expanded but doesn't break, because if break
Mm-hmm.
it's going to collapse. So you
Mm-hmm.
need that elasticity, and actually in chia work very well to give that elasticity and actually that trench in the dough. So whenever you force it, you can have that pocket of air, very nice and very well covered. For that type of application, I recommend to use less water because then you're gonna have more strength, more hardening,
Yeah.
and more elasticity in the chia flour. You can use it. Normally, remember that in your pastry, you want to have that elasticity when you bake it. You want that to keep it to be able to expand and contract, but you also want it to have it very crunchy. So be careful of the amount that you're using it because sometimes it's going to be a little bit more soft, the end product, if you use too much because it's going to give you too much gelling. So
Hmm.
I normally recommend a 2%, no more than that, that you can replace, let's say, the egg, or you can replace the gluten with 2%, and then you're gonna have a very nice, soft and crushy crumbs, let's say. But if you go more, like the 10% I'm saying, it's gonna be a little bit more soft. It's not gonna be that crunchy. So depending
Cool.
what type of crust you're looking in your pastry.
You have to reduce your hydration, or the soluble fiber is going to give you a soft and wet dough. So it's a matter of managing the hydration, keeping in mind that you have something that will absorb more water. So instead of putting more water in, don't put more water in. Maybe even reduce the water to keep that flakiness.
And you will not activate the soluble fiber.
Yep.
That's the idea. You will not add it, and it's gonna be there, but it's not gonna be enough water for the to activate the soluble water, the
Excellent.
soluble fiber.
There is no difference. It's the same thing. It's two different names. Um, the egg white most commonly will refer to liquid egg white, as it comes out of the egg, and albumin is the protein that the egg white the egg white contains. So egg white is on average 1/8 egg protein and 7/8 water. So usually to replace, if you have liquid egg whites in a formula, for example, if you have 800 grams of liquid egg white and you take that out, you would replace it with something like 100 grams of chia and 700 grams of water to start, to try and see how that affects in terms of viscosity and things like that. Because or if you're using egg albumin, you would use 1 part albumin and 7 parts water. So albumin is the protein name for the protein in egg whites. Yeah. Remy, you want to go ahead? Yeah.
Well, basically, there has been a study, a scientific study of testing in reducing fat. You can achieve up to 50 to 75% fat reduction. Just you have to take in consideration that the chia powder also contains fat. So it's gonna help you to replace butter. If you want to have a butter-free product, yes, it is possible. I mean, if you see in the muffin, we are not using butter, we're using coconut, and we're using almonds and chia, which bring you the fat, the
That's
healthy
the
fat,
balance.
let's
Yeah.
say, less saturated fat, more unsaturated fat,
Hmm.
let's say polyunsaturated fat, with a good balance of omega 3, omega 6. But yes,
Yeah.
it is possible. Now, I always say just we have to work with it, and I recommend to our customers all around the world is like first try it, changing the recipe, then we can have a call and go through the troubleshooting because sometimes it's
Yeah.
not going to be like one to one because every recipe is different depending on the starch, the system that you're using, how much water you're using. It's going to behave a little different. But when
Hmm.
I see the result that you're getting on your first try, I can give you some hints to on your second try, nail it and love it. And this is what it
Perfect.
normally happened, you know. We first try it, and Mark, you try it the first time and say it was a little bit difficult, and then you try again, and today you've been doing a lot of product with it because once you know how the chia flour behave on your recipe on the product that you want to do, you can manage and find it very useful for your
Excellent.
recipe.
All right. Thank you very much, Remy. Thank you, everyone, for coming today. We really appreciate it. And we hope that you enjoyed the information that we were able to share with you. Please let us know. Uh, go over to Facebook and the Baking Industry Professionals group, and you can put some comments there. Always appreciate hearing from you and what we can do better and what you'd like to hear more of, right? So that's it for me. My guest today was Remy Regato from Venexia, and my name is Mark Florka, and I'm the Baked in Science podcast host for BAKERpedia. And this was your BAKERview on pies, pastries, and handheld snacks. See you later.